Mel Kiper's latest mock draft has a shakeup at the quarterback position. Among the quarterbacks taken, he has Jalen Hurts in the second round being taken by the Steelers. He had Jordan Love going to John Gruden in Las Vegas. But the big one is Tua Tagovailoa no longer going 5 to the Dolphins, but instead 6 to the Chargers. And that brings us to some required reading this morning. It's an ESPN.com article written by Seth Walder of ESPN Analytics on projecting the Pro Bowl prospects of the quarterbacks in the draft. And among the two big ones that we talk about most of the time, the surprise is that Tua has a higher chance to be a Pro Bowl caliber player, or at least a starter, than Joe Burrow. And that's despite the fact that Burrow has a slightly better grade. So what is going on here? Ultimately, it's about the measurables. Believe it or not, the model is concerned with Burrow's small hands, which are 9 inches, and his arm length relative to his height. And that may sound ridiculous to ding the Heisman Trophy winner on his hands, but these factors have shown in the past to have some predictive value for NFL performance, and that pushes Tua ahead. So we have Laura and we have RC. Laura, I mean, in one conversation here, we're saying now Tua is falling behind Justin Herbert because of concerns about the injury, and then the analytics are telling us that he's ahead of Joe Burrow as a prospect. So at the end of the day, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, it kind of just makes your brain get scrambled as you try to think about all of this. I think it's important, Greeny, to point out, too, and Mel said this a couple of times, and you have said this throughout the show, that Mel still views Tua as a guy that would be ahead of Herbert in how he ranks, and he's just projecting how the draft is going to look. And there has been, as we've mentioned throughout the show, a lot more conversation about Miami potentially taking Herbert and Tua maybe going to that 6th spot there with the LA Chargers, which, you know, creates even more fascination through all of this. Maybe this whole time the Chargers have been the team that we're hoping they could get Tua. Maybe they still feel like they need to trade up to just absolutely secure that spot. And I think when you're looking at how to predict all of this, there's so much risk involved, but all you can do is look at what you see from the skill set. You're seeing Tua in his workout right here that was sent there to a bunch of teams. That was his pro day. That's what was sent out around the NFL. And that's what people are going off of right this second. But then there's a lot of the projections that are going off of what you've seen with that generational type arm from Tua. And we've seen that for years. We've seen the accuracy on display. That's what's going to allow, too, for people to look at this from the analytics standpoint, and even beyond that, and say, this is a guy that if you feel like taking that risk from the durability standpoint, you're going to potentially have a Pro Bowler, maybe even more than that.
You know, Nick, sometimes I feel like we laugh at things like hand size, and I've never even heard of arm length relative to his height before. but they measure these things for a reason, right? I mean, there is some predictive value. Would you take that into account as you assess these guys?
I wouldn't. I mean, I was with everything that Seth was saying up until we got to the hand size and arm length relative, because I thought he was going in the direction of saying that the context matters, because I think that's more important than any of this stuff is the context surrounding him, the coach that you go to, the organization that you go to, and the teammates that you end up around, and maybe even the division that you end up in. I think all of that stuff goes much further to determine a player's career than hand size and arm length relative to whatever. But I do think that Cincinnati has not shown a history necessarily of being an organization that wants to invest in success. And I think that could be a ding against maybe Burrow having as good of a career. But it seems as if they have a smart young coach and they really have a great group of talent around him, bringing back a healthy A.J. Green and I think Tyler Boyd and Mixon in the backfield. That's a good group. And John Ross was somebody who can run faster than anybody in the league, who I really like coming out. If they could get an offensive line that can protect him, I think that Burrow has a good chance. But the hand size and arm length relative to height like that, that's not something that I'm putting a bunch of credence in, especially when we've seen these guys do it. If it wasn't for the fact that we've seen Joe Burrow throw a football and his arm length seemed fine doing that in college, and we've seen Tua do the same thing, and his hand size seemed okay. Like, if it wasn't for the fact that I saw that, then maybe I would say, oh, his hands are too small. But we've seen his hands are not that small. The college ball is not that different from the NFL ball.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the circumstances into which these guys are drafted will probably go a longer way towards determining their success than anything else. And that's the one thing over which they have no control. Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.